Other day I got sent a video, at least I think I got sent it, or maybe I saw it. I don't remember. It's hard to say. But it was another truck driver, and he was talking about the so-called driver shortage. And this is something that I think that I want to touch on a bit more. Now, you know, if you've seen my other Trucking Report videos, I've talked about this a lot, but maybe I want to do a little bit of a deep dive, I think, with some of the folks out there that may not fully understand this. And what he said was perfect, and I'm gonna give it my own spin here and just explain what I see as an owner operator out here in the world too. There is no shortage of truck drivers in the U.S. There's something like 10 million guys that have CDLs. What's happened is that most of these big companies have burned all those guys. Let me give you an example. For those of you not in the industry, let me walk you through it. You tell your dispatcher, for instance, that your son's birthday is June 1st, and hey, this is April, and you're telling them in April, and you're giving them like 6 weeks of notice. Hey, I need to be home by the 1st for my son's birthday. Then you remind them May 1st. And then partway through May, again, you remind them, hey, I need to be home by the 1st. And then the company burns you on it. That's one example of companies burning guys. And they're like, dude, you know, you guys are treating me really terribly. Another example, this is a bit more specific, but back in the day when I used to pull other people's trailers, show up, pick up the sled, and the tires are bald on the trailer. Now, if I get DOT'd, I get the ticket for those bald tires. And I call up the company and say, hey, your tires are bald on your trailer. And they're like, well, just take it over to the TNA and have them fix it. It's like, you want me to take my time out of my day and my profitability to fix your problem. That wasn't one guy who did that. That was probably 15 other drivers that could have done this, but they didn't do it. So now I get to deal with that. Oh, no problem. We'll throw in an extra 25 bucks. Because 25 bucks is going to cover 4 to 6 hours of my time of sitting in a TNA that smells like piss. Yeah. So this is the problem. These companies have burned all of these drivers in the US, and no one wants to work for them anymore because they're a shitty company. And you can go right down the list. Go find any pro driver who's been driving for more than 10 years. Owner operator, doesn't matter. Go find them, and they'll all tell you story after story after story, and they'll tell you the names. And we all know the names. They're all on the side of the big trucks, right? All the big trucking companies. We all know who they are. They've burned the market so badly that nobody wants to work for them anymore. So the only choice they have to stay in business is to import a bunch of illegals, or import a bunch of H-1Bs and then burn those people, because they can go through billions of those people, right? See, there's only so many Americans that'll actually put up with that. But they can just keep going through those guys, and if they don't like it, they just deport them, right? And it's cheaper to do that than it is to actually be a good company. This segues kind of nicely into a topic that I'm going to do in another video about why are we keeping all these companies around, but I'll come back to that later. Suffice it to say, as far as like a driver shortage in the trucking world, no, there's no shortage. There's plenty of guys. It's just the companies have brought this on themselves. All these big companies, and you can, like I said, you can go right down the list of all the mega carriers. We all know the names. We all see the trucks all piled up on I-80 because they've put the cheapest labor in there that they could possibly find, because they've burned all of their competent people. Pinned at the top of my TikTok page, you will see the competency crisis. Competent people have always been expensive. That has never not been the case throughout all of human history. If somebody's competent, if someone really knows what they're doing, they're going to be expensive, especially if they know that they're the ones that are doing 3 times the work that somebody else is doing, right? It's sort of like why my commie followers can't understand why communism actually fails every time it's tried. It's because if I'm doing 3 times the quality of the work than the guy next to me, I want 3 times the money. Or 3 times the whatever that you're paying me. I'm going to want 3 times that because I'm doing 3 times the work. That's why it always fails, because of that. And if it's like, well, but everybody's the same, well, then I'm going to do the same work he's doing, which is going to be a race to the bottom. That's why it doesn't work. That's why a lot of countries are having these problems. Yeah, I know you guys see all the videos and everything. You see what they want you to see. right? That's how that works. So, no, like the competent truck drivers that are out there, there are plenty of them. There are plenty of guys that are perfectly capable of pulling trailers all over this country and getting the job done. They're not going to do it for free. And they're certainly not going to do it for the wages that you're paying now. And these companies have brought this on themselves. They should all be going out of business. All of them should be going out of business. Instead, we're importing them. And then on top of that, it's costing the country the culture, because it's destroying the culture. It's destroying everything else along with it. But, you know, but boy, we got cheap freight rates. Yeah, I guess it's one way to look at it. You get your cheap freight rates, but you also got your country, you know, turning into, you know, a third world shithole. Right? I mean, like we know this. Truck drivers, you know, they all know this stuff. Ask tow truck drivers. I'm not talking about the tow guys who tow the small cars, 4 wheels. I'm talking about go find the truck drivers, you know, the semi tow truck drivers, and they'll tell you the stories about that, about the actual shitholes in the sleepers cut. Yeah, I mean, come on, like this is what you're going to end up with. So if you're gonna do this kind of stuff, then you're gonna reap the whirlwind on it. So yeah, there is no shortage of good guys. There's just shortage of good companies, and all of these companies suck. They're just different degrees of suckage, right? That's all it is. They all suck. They just, some suck slightly less than the other, you know, like 1% better. Guys go to the go to the truck stops, and you'll see these little booklets. They used to, I don't know if they have them anymore, but they used to have the little booklets, and you'd thumb through them and you'd see other companies, and they'd say, oh, come drive for us and we're better. Then you call up the recruiter, and the recruiter says, you know, yeah, we can do everything for you. You know, we'll make sure you're home on that birthday. We'll make sure those trailers have good tires on them, all that good shit, right? Then you get there, you jump ship, you go over there, and then you find out that they're just as bad, if not worse, than what you just left. That's how horrible it is. That's the industry. That's how, because the bar has been set so low. Now, why does this happen? Here's your deep dive. For anybody who stuck around, why does this happen? It happens because shitty salespeople. You're like, what the fuck does that have to do with anything? Shitty salespeople are where it always starts. Shitty salespeople are where it always starts. Okay? The shitty salespeople show up and they say, yeah, we can haul that freight for you. You know, and because they're not very good salespeople, and because they don't know the industry, they haven't driven a truck, they don't know anything about the industry, they're just into sales. Well, that's fine. You can do sales, and I'm okay with that. But you have to know a little bit about that when you start making promises that someone else has to deliver on. Okay? Someone else has to deliver on all your bullshit, which means that your bullshit has to at least be doable. But if you're going to start throwing, and of course, what do most weak salespeople do? Drop the price. They just keep dropping price. They drop. That's what they do. That's what most weak salespeople do. They bash the competitor as hard as they can, and they drop their price as much as they can, because that's what a weak salesperson does. Well, that's what they do in the trucking industry. So they go to the carrier or whoever the shipper is and say, yeah, we can deliver your freight, and we'll drop the price and so on, and we'll compete with this other guy, and we're going to do everything. And they start telling these guys fantasies of drivers are going to show up and they're going to take all your freight for this low rate, and on and on. In the meantime, there's no way to get somebody to do what they just promised unless you abuse the shit out of the drivers, unless you abuse the shit out of the guys who are showing up and they go, dude, we can't make any of that stuff true, and certainly not for the rates that you're quoting. That's what ends up happening. And then they have to try and figure out how they can match their drivers to their cost model that they just sold to somebody. Is that making sense? That's exactly what happens. They're buying the business too cheaply. Now, then there's the other problem of, once again, we'll go even deeper. It's like, well, how is it these companies are doing that? Shouldn't they go out of business if they go too cheap? Yes, you can volume yourself right out of business. Seen many guys do it. Seen many companies do it across different sectors. You can volume yourself totally out of business. But you can't beat the printing press. And that's the problem. The counterfeiters are counterfeiting a bunch of dollars to keep a lot of these companies around. Who are the companies that are keeping it around? Probably the executives who went to the island. So yeah, until all this stuff is dealt with, then this is just going to continue on.